CBT, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. We covered it this week in class, and I have mixed feelings about it. What I'm going to do first is recap some of the tools, techniques, the discussions we had around it, and then overall sum up my thoughts about the approach. So in class, the first discussion we had was around the core tenets of CBT and contrasting that with the person-centered approach. And the easiest way that I can almost bottom line in it and understand the differences, CBT, as implied by the name cognitive, very much focused on thoughts and ways of thinking and how that impacts behavior and emotion. Whereas the person-centered approach is very much honing in on the emotion, the feelings, and exploring it from that perspective. And the way the tutor described the relational difference, person-centered approach is, they describe it as like an expert to expert. So the counselor is bringing their therapeutic expertise and the client is bringing their expertise in living their own life and literally being them. Whereas in CBT, it's more of a teacher-student dynamic where the counselor is teaching the tools, techniques, ways of thinking, and then giving tasks, homework for the client to go away and implement to then come back in another session, review, evaluate, and go again. So I don't want to necessarily say that the power dynamic in CBT is unequal, but it is definitely different from the person-centered approach. Speaking of the tools and techniques, in class we covered two main ones. So we looked at the ABC model and the FACE method. And in this video, I'm just going to cover the ABC model because that's the one that stood out to me a little bit more. So ABC, A stands for activating event or trigger, B stands for beliefs, and the C is consequences or behaviors. And the idea behind the ABC model is to help a client understand events and how it is impacting and affecting different aspects, areas of their life and ways of thinking. So what we did is we sort of paired up and were each looking at a personal example for ourselves. The best way I can sort of explain it right now to you is with an example. So let's suppose I'm walking down the street, I see someone walking a dog towards me. That is the activating event. The beliefs, the thoughts that spring up are, I see a dog walking towards me, I believe that dog is going to attack. So the consequences of those thoughts and beliefs is I start to panic. And for me, the method felt very intuitive and it reminded me of coaching, where you're working one-to-one with someone, they're bringing like a surface level statement to the table and you are asking questions, giving insight that helps take that surface level statement and then dig down in a very structured way until you get to the core beliefs that are leading to these behaviors. So it's a very, very straightforward, very clearly defined, very focused way of working with someone on something they're finding challenging. And the tutor described it as, for example, CBT works or is used frequently with things like phobias. So, here is the behaviors that are concerning you. Let's dig down and look at, okay, what events are triggering these behaviors, and then what thoughts and beliefs is that event triggering. So yeah, it just felt very intuitive, very interesting to learn. And again, I could see those similarities with, coaching that I've done and the way that I've structured my own sort of questioning and discovery in different areas of my life. So that brings me on to my thoughts about CBT as a whole, bearing in mind I've only spent a couple of hours touching on it from a level 3 perspective. I mentioned having mixed feelings around CBT. So what am I mixing up? On the one hand, I really, really love the focused, structured way of working that the CBT approach implements. But what I noticed when we went away to practice the tools and techniques, so ABC model, the FACE method, is that it seemed very detached from feeling, as opposed to in contrast to the person-centered approach. CBT felt like looking at the problem and the client from almost like a very bird's eye view. There's a distance between you and it, whereas with the person-centered approach, you are very much sitting in that moment and those feelings with the client and sharing that experience with them. So while I definitely click with that, that structured, goal, process-oriented way of working that CBT uses, I'm also drawn to that deep emotional and relational component of the person-centered approach. So I do wonder if it's possible to combine the two, because person-centered approach, at least from what I have learned so far, is in no way as structured as CBT is, because it is the client who is leading the way and they can bring anything to any session. But yeah, it's that deep emotional work just makes sense to me, but also having like a structured, this is what we are working towards, and asking questions and guiding in a very structured way also makes sense. So again, I appreciate that I'm only at level 3. These are only, 2 of many methods, I presume, and who knows, at some point perhaps I will come across an approach that answers that question and melds the two. Who knows? But it's interesting to think about, and that's at this moment where my thoughts sit with the CBT approach. So looking ahead to next week, we'll be covering Gestalt. We did cover that I covered that at level 2, but level 2, very foundational, very basic. And Gestalt, there were bits and pieces that sort of made sense, but on the whole, it didn't really click. So I'm interested to cover it at level 3 and dig into it in a bit more depth and see what I can get out of it. And I'll be back next week to recap as usual. So thank you for listening. Speak soon.